Now, our next speaker is Dr. Peter Swinyard, who is a very experienced medical leader. He's been active in the local medical committee world for over 25 years, hugely experienced, and he has been central to an amalgamation of local medical committees, which has produced one of the best organised and one of the most interesting local medical committee structures in the Wessex area in England. Today he is speaking to us as chairman of his association, but the history is that it was previously called the Small Practices Association, of which I'm very proud to be the 1,000th member, incidentally, in those days. And that is important today because the perspective of organisations that are not huge, we need to hear particularly at a time when the thinking in the 5-year forward view and in much of NHS England centrally is that big is better. And I think the trend, if you like, the long-term trend is towards bigger grouping, practices amalgamating, federations, and all the things you know about. And here we have a considerable expert who's going to offer, I think, a slightly different perspective. Peter.
Thank you very much, sir. Right, see if I can... Right, I'll clip this on in the hope that you can perhaps hear me at the back without me spitting into it too often. Can you hear me at the back all right? Wonderful. Okay. On your tables, ladies and gentlemen, you have the ultimate tool which you need for this talk. If you look, there's a little jar on each table, and it contains this, a humbug. And if you consider what I'm saying is humbug, please throw it at me. I shan't be offended. I don't want to do the gloom and doom bit, because GPs are really good at having a moan. You put 5 GPs together, you'll get a real moan workshop. But I do think that as patients, and I'm a patient too, I mean I had an operation last week, I am a patient as well as a doctor. We do need to understand a little bit of what's going on in the environment in which we swim. And I do recognise also that I'm standing between you and your coffee, and so I will try and be reasonably concise. And as I say, the humbugs can be thrown. But please be aware of these things. There are enormous financial pressures, and whatever the politicians say about chucking money at us, don't believe a word of it. The money which has been chucked this last week or two is not for new developments, it is standstill money. The job of GPs is becoming quite undoable. It is a very, very, very different job to the one I signed up for some 30 years ago when I became a principal in practice in Swindon. A very different job. In those days we used to refer an awful lot of people to the hospital for things which we don't even think twice about managing ourselves now. And those of you who have raised blood pressure, who have diabetes, who have other long-term conditions, you are not hospital patients nowadays, you are patients working with your general practitioner for your good health. And you are not spending your entire lives in outpatient clinics for what are conditions which we can deal with in the practice. A lot of my contemporaries have given up and they're going. And it is because the job is becoming undoable and the pressures from the media, the Daily Mail, politicians, all having a go at us just for trying our best, is just, it's a drip, drip, drip of demoralisation. At the age of 59 and a half, I'm about the oldest GP left standing in Swindon. And that is a tragedy, because we are losing the experience of the old farts club like me, who have been there, seen it and done it. And we need the old farts club to guide our younger doctors, because, you know, we have seen the problems before, we do know a way through, we perhaps know a local service which others may not know about, we perhaps know which consultant is really good at specific things. We're now seeing practice closures. I had the pleasure of sitting next at breakfast to a gentleman who lives in Caversham in Reading. And in fact, a lady friend of mine also lives in Caversham, and they both go to the same practice, which is now under special measures and is staffed by locums and run by God knows who, because all the doctors have gone. I've talked to people who have sort of supervised practices where the practice has had to close because all the doctors have gone. The CQC seems to delight in putting pressure down upon us. And what do? They inspect us and they count the bodies after the things have gone wrong. They are not being constructive. And if they label us as having a failing practice, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. We will fail if we're labelled as failing, because we'll never be able to recruit another doctor. All our good nurses, our good receptionists, our good managers will go. It is an irretrievable situation. And most importantly, at the bottom of this, patients are finding it hard to see their doctor, not a doctor, their doctor. And if you have a long-term condition, you want their doctor, not just any old taxi rank doctor. The unrealistic expectations of the NHS. People expect to be able to have what they want when they want it, the sort of Tesco service of general practice which the government and all politicians seem terribly excited about. You know, of course you can have unlimited rice pudding. You can have your GP there on tap for you 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7 days a week. Actually, it's not your GP, it's a GP who's probably very well qualified, might have continuity of record if we're lucky, as long as the computer systems talk to each other, which isn't a given. But it won't be your GP, and it won't be the one you know and trust. And in all honesty, when I'm ill, I don't want to be the unexpected patient in the bagging area. I want to be that doctor's patient. I want to know my doctor, and I want to know that he knows me and my background, my social environment, and all the things that go to making me as a person, not just the bloke with the fat tummy and the bad back. The inspection industry is really a negative thing. Now, politicians all say, oh, we've got to inspect you to make sure you're good enough and up to standard and all this sort of thing. And they forget that if they deprofessionalise us, that again will be a self-fulfilling prophecy. I mean, as a professional, I was brought up to believe that it was my responsibility to stay up to date. My responsibility to make sure I did the best possible practice that I could. My responsibility to be up to date and informed and educated and be able to give my best for my patients all the time. And I didn't need to have Care Quality Commission monitor, revalidation and all the other stuff that hits us to try and take my time out of seeing my patients, which is what I should be doing, and filling in forms and so on for CQC. And CQC is my particular bête noire. There's probably some CQC inspectors in here, and my apologies to you all, and in fact my commiserations to you all. For example, I took on a new partner 18 months or so ago. Wonderful, nice chap. He had been a salaried doctor in the next door practice, came to us as a partner. 28-page form to get him approved by CQC as a partner. Couldn't be done by my manager, it had to be done by me. CQC wouldn't accept my manager signing it off. Okay, got past that hurdle. He got permission to be a partner in my practice. He then decided after a year that he would give 1 month's notice and leave. On the last day, he could give 1 month's notice contractually. And he did. So I wrote to the CQC again, inevitably evident online, and I told them he is leaving. In fact, he has left, because he took a month's notice and took a month's sick leave. And they then said, we require 5 weeks' notice to see if we will give you permission for him to leave. I wanted them to say no. So, where are we now? We have a new government, sort of. Same Secretary of State for Health in England. The healthcare, of course, is a devolved thing. It's different in Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland. Strangely, they don't seem to need a CQC there to keep the GPs in line. I don't know how many of you read the Daily Telegraph. Can I have a show of hands? Go on, admit it. It's my primary medical journal. And I nearly threw up on the cornflakes on Tuesday morning when I read Jeremy Hunt writing in it. And he told me that the NHS has all the money it needs now and it's our job to deliver it. Come on, boys. And actually, he didn't mention primary care or general practice even once in the article. It was all hospitals and things. Yes, I felt like better that morning. Now, what's happened to general practice in the last 5 years? We are being asked to do ever more. Okay, good. Why not? Get the care with the patient, by the patient, where it should be. But what are we given to do it with? The share of NHS resources allocated to general practice, not primary care, to general practice, and my figures are slightly approximate because you can spin them any way you like, depending on whether you're a politician, civil servant, or a GP. But the approximate truth is that our share of the NHS total pot has fallen from 11% to 7.5%. and that is to do 91% of patient consultations in the health service. The demand on our services is escalating uncontrolled. I work out my demand in consultations per patient per year. When I started my practice, and I set up single-handed after 10 years in a partnership in Swindon, so 1995 I set up single-handed, my consultation rate was 3.5 consultations per patient per year. It's now somewhere heading for 9 consultations per patient per year, and yet we have less resources with which to do that. And you wonder why GPs are feeling a little overstressed. The overall numbers of GPs are about steady, whatever the political spin. They say we have more doctors, I say each doctor does less sessions. The overall number of whole-time equivalents is not too different. And the government, well, there was a bidding war before the election, wasn't there? Labour promised us 8,000 doctors, the Conservatives promised us 5,000 doctors, or it might be the other way around. The Royal College said, well, that sounds nice. And we all said, yeah, right. And these were going to be 5,000 new doctors, which had been promised. Unfortunately, although the number of training places was expanded very slightly in the last few years, the number of doctors taking them up has dropped. And they are now going to second and third rounds of recruitment to try and get people into GP training. There are some areas, Peter Holden in Derbyshire was telling me at the OMC conference last week, 60% of vacancies in the GP training scheme in Derbyshire unfilled. Grimsby and Hull, over 40% of the course unfilled. They cannot recruit young doctors to be the general practitioners of the future. And once they get into general practice training, it's still 3 or 4 years before they're fully fledged to become independently practicing GPs after that. So where are we going to get these 5,000 new doctors from defeats me. Unless we import a few from Australia or New Zealand or Canada or somewhere else, or from the EU, which is technically easier, but there's a language problem because most of them speak better English than my patients do. But not necessarily colloquial English. And being faced with a consultation, so just, oh, well, you know, doc, it's like, well, you know, you can't be too careful these days. Well, I read in the paper, I was reading the Mail the other day, and it said that I should, well, I don't know, you know, I've got this, well, what are you going to do about it? So that's where we're going to be, isn't it? Door closed. Get your placebos here. Well, actually, some people like placebos. Why shouldn't they? Placebos, as those of you who have done that will know, means I shall please. But let's read Simon Stevens' 5-year forward view. Now, Simon Stevens, as you all probably know, is the new chief executive of NHS England, and effectively the NHS in England. His 5-year forward view was one of the best documents I've ever read in 20 or 30 years of reading dreadfully heavy documents from those who seek to govern us. It was clear thinking, it was well written, it was concise, and it was sensible, and it was positive, and it was doable. And if you haven't read his 5-year forward view, I would commend it to you. It's a damn good read. And he said, and I quote verbatim, a combination of growing demand, no further annual efficiencies, and flat real terms funded by 2020 produce a mismatch between resources and patient needs, not wants, needs, of nearly £30 billion a year. Well, we've got £8 billion promised by the government, which means 22 billion of efficiency savings are required. It's not going to happen, is it? The number of new GPs in training needs to be increased as fast as possible. Again, a direct quote from Simon Stevens' 5-year forward view. So what do we want to do in general practice? I'm conscious of the time, Chairman. We want to do the job we trained for. We want to see and care for our patients, not to spend hours and days treating a computer and correcting codings. We want to provide continuity of care, one of the most vital things for those with long-term conditions. We want to work with our patients to improve their health and well-being. We don't want to be computer doctors. I spent 3 full clinical days in March correcting codings on my computer so that we actually got enough resources in with the Quality Outcomes Framework to work for the next year. We want to be accessible, but we still need to recognise GPs want a work-life balance. We cannot be in our surgeries grinding through 8 to 8, 7 days a week, because we would fall over with stress and with mental illness. So we have to acknowledge that GPs are, some of us, moderately human as well. And we do need to have breaks, we need to have a work-life balance. We want our health agenda driven by patients working with their doctors, not by political diktat. We want it genuinely bottom up. We want our patients to tell us what they want us to do. We want to spend our time with our patients, not with inspectors. We want a career structure. It's been lovely to meet a doctor of the future here, who I had a chat with over dinner last night, and I want a career structure for that group of doctors in general practice. And my generation, of course, we came into general practice as a principal at the age of 29 or 30. That's your lot. And you carry on doing that for the rest of your life. Now, actually, it's a wonderful, wonderful career. However, people are looking for variety. They're looking for portfolio careers, for career progression. And we do want pilot schemes to be evaluated before we all get told to do it. So how do we get there? Well, that's the American system. We don't have to import the American system, but it does seem to work there. But it's very expensive. So we've got to develop our great working relationships with patients and patient groups, and we've got to try and include in those groups all types of patients, not just the more vocal. We've got to enlist patient support when times are hard. Do you know, when I started my practice single-handed, I had no money. I had premises I'd had to fund myself. For the first 3 months in my practice, I couldn't pay myself any income at all. And for the following 3 months, I could only pay myself pocket money. And without the support of my patients group, my practice would have folded. And it wasn't just the moral support, it was the practical support of coming and helping me. When I opened my new premises, I had what I called the strippers and the slappers came in. The first group were the people who stripped off the old wallpaper, and then we had the slappers who slapped some paint on. And they were great. And you know, doctors need a little bit of help too, and who better than their patients who are their friends? So, what have we got to do? We've got to save 2 or 3% a year on NHS spend, which has never ever been achieved before. That's the efficiency savings. 1.3%, 1.6% has been the best ever achieved. We've got to provide 7 days service because the politicians say so, and when all's said and done, they have a mandate to do it. We've got to provide continuity of care. And those second and third bullet points are mutually contradictory. We've got to keep people out of hospitals and keep the hospitals for doing what they do best, which is complex, really serious Sturm und Drang medicine. We've got to remain financially viable, and we've got to find from somewhere 15,000 new GPs. So that was simple. So we've got to support self-care. Without that, we're dead in the water. We've got to get people to the right place for their condition. We've got to give people the responsibility to go to the right place, or indeed not to go anywhere. And if you can't read that at the back, it said, you've got a rare condition called good health. Frankly, we're not sure how to treat it. So you've got to have quality care, continuity, financial viability. I loved this one, which was seen outside a pizza place. Buy 1 quiche for the price of 2 and receive a second quiche absolutely free, but only for 12 You've got to have happy staff and a good environment. That's the Heart Attack Grill in Arizona. That's for their quadruple bypass burger. I commend it to you. As a spectator sport, of course. And you've got to have an up-to-date doctor in good premises available all the time. Thank you.